With the possible exception of a stranger abduction, almost nothing is as frightening to parents as the idea of a school shooting. How do these things happen? What can we teach our kids before something like that happens? How can we talk to them about it when they see it on TV? And what can we tell them to do if they find themselves in the middle of this very rare but very dangerous situation? Luckily, Alain Burrese teaches this exact thing internationally and was gracious enough to come onto the show and tell us what he knows so that we can be better prepared to prepare our children. Thank you for watching. Please do hit that like and subscribe button. Check us out on Patreon or come find us on Facebook. The more involved you are, the better we can do our job. So thank you all, and let's get to work. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today is Alain Burrese. Hello, Alain.
Hello, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for taking the time and being with us today. Now, Alain is a former U.S. Army sniper, a fifth-degree black belt, an attorney, and a certified active shooter response instructor through Safariland Training Group. He's the author of 9 books and 11 instructional DVDs, including Survive a Shooting, Strategies to Survive Active Shooters and Terrorist Attacks. Alain brings his education and extensive experience to Reflex Protect as the Director of Active Defense Training, where he develops and conducts both live and online training with common sense approach to staying safe, defending yourself, and surviving workplace violence and active threats. And he's on today to talk to us about surviving an active shooter situation, both in terms of how to prepare our kids and ourselves for a school shooting situation, and if we happen to be stuck in an active shooter situation at work, at a mall, or something like that. So I think the first question is, what are the biggest misconceptions people have about being in that sort of danger?
A couple. One, that it will never happen to me, or it'll never happen here, because everyone says that whenever one of these incidents happens. Things like that don't happen here. Well, they don't until they do. So that's a big one. And then another is, there's nothing we can do. I remember watching TV on the news when the shooting at the Maryland, was it a post office or a business? It was a few years ago. And they had people that were hiding under desks. You know, the guy, one interviewed said, well, I was hiding and I heard him reloading and such. And then another person is saying, well, there's nothing you can do for this kind of situation. And I'm screaming at the TV, no, yes, there are things you can do. And when he was reloading, that was your opportunity to do something.
I'm reminded of, I'm recording here from Oregon, and do you remember back in the 90s when there was a shooting at a high school in Springfield, and it was 2 kids from the wrestling team, not even teachers, who jumped up and, again, while the guy was reloading, took the guy down and disarmed him.
Yeah, and that's another misconception that's out there. For a third one is you have to have a firearm. You know, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's not true, because a lot of these incidents have been stopped by regular people without firearms, either with just their hands or improvised weapons. There was that situation, I think the pepper spray incident was in Oregon too, the guy that went out and sprayed the gun guy with pepper spray and then took the gun away at the college out there. So, I mean, a lot of them have been stopped by people without firearms. And the one in Arizona, if you remember when the congresswoman was shot and tragically the little girl was killed in that shooting, it was a 70-some-year-old man and a 60-some-year-old woman who stopped that shooter. So age and gender doesn't matter either.
And I think that's important news for people to hear, because I feel like there is that narrative of helplessness when we see the news reports in the face of this kind of thing. And in your book, I'll bring it here for the viewers to take a closer look at, you mentioned that there's kind of a theme in various programs to survive it. And that theme usually runs along the lines of run, hide, fight. There's even a movie coming out with that name pretty soon.
And that was put out sort of by the government, and it's the most known, and it's adopted by the most places, and it's not a bad model. And there's a lot of other models that are similar. They run around the same themes. My model is similar. I just changed the terminology because I like the terms that I use better, because I think that helps people get it a little bit more.
Well, that makes sense. That's actually something I really wanted to pick your brain on a bit, because I got your book in the mail as I was doing a series on surviving an active shooter incident. And for example, your reasons that you don't say hide but instead say deny are really, it changed the content of the video series I did. So
Hiding and hoping is not a plan. I mean,
yeah.
you know, hiding can be a strategy to deny the shooter access to you. If he doesn't see you, he might not shoot. But there are a lot of other ways to deny: getting behind cover, barricading, actively keeping that shooter from getting you instead of just hiding. And if you are hiding or barricading or anything else, you have to be thinking ahead and prepared to do something else, whether that's escape to safety if an opportunity arises, or attack back and defend yourself and take that guy out if your hiding spot or your denying access is breached.
I think that active mindset is the part of the difference between hide and deny that really got my attention. And I think we can apply that to the entire situation, that understanding that you can take action to increase your chances of survival. You can take action to make the situation better for yourself, for your family. And it's really our responsibility to take action and not just hope for the best.
It is. And that's why I like escape better than run. You know, you just run where? You know, escape, I want you to escape to safety. That might be dropping to the floor and crawling away. It might be going out a window. It might be running, but it's just, I want you to escape the danger zone rather than just run blindly somewhere.
I think that's a great place to kind of start digging in, where the government or general theme of run, hide, fight starts with run, but escape, as you say, again, it's more specific, it's more action oriented. What are some ways that we can really, that people can understand how better to escape when that situation develops?
One, knowing where your escape routes are. I mean, when you go into a place, you should know the ways out. You know, in my live performances, and I'm getting older, so sometimes when I ask crowds, they're not as familiar with some of the older movie references, but I'll ask them if they saw the movie Ronin with Robert De Niro. And if they're my age or older, I mean, everybody puts their hand up. But, you know, he walks out of that little cafe at the beginning and, you know, takes the gun that he had hidden in the milk crates. And Deidre, the woman who just hired him, looks at him. He's like, "Lady, I don't go into any place I don't know the way out of." And that's what I want for everyone. I want you to always know the way out of wherever you're at. And I'll go into malls and I'll ask people, where do you go? How do you get out? And everybody, or not everybody, but most people think of the main entrances and exits we always use. They forget that there's an exit out of almost every store. It's employees only. We're not allowed to use them on a regular daily basis, but in an emergency, that could be your quickest way out of that mall. And we have to know those. And like in the book, I have the fire example, you know, at the concert out east, you know, over 100 people died. Most of them died bottlenecked at the front door. They couldn't get out, they bottlenecked, they jammed up, they died of the smoke. A few that knew about the back way, they went out and escaped, and a lot more could have went out that way if they would have thought of it. And that's why knowing exits is so important.
Yeah. Also worth noting, there's always a way out of the kitchen if you're in a bar or a restaurant.
And that's how the people got out in that fire. They went out the kitchen, and you know, like I said, a handful of them went out the kitchen way, and a whole bunch of others could have if they wouldn't have ran and bottlenecked the front door. And it cost a lot of people their lives by going to that main entrance, and they couldn't get out.
Yeah. A lot of people I know who think about these things more than is probably healthy. I'm also guilty. Love kitchens for this kind of situation, because there's always a way out. There's lots of stuff in there that offers some cover, not just concealment. And it's also full of lots of dangerous things.
Yes, I mean, if you want improvised weapons or legitimate weapons. When you look at knives, kitchen knives,
Hmm.
which, people have probably been killed more with kitchen knives when you look at knife attacks over the broad spectrum, when domestic violence situations and stuff. So yeah, kitchen knives, other things in the kitchen can be great weapons. You have things that are cover, which is bulletproof, not just concealing you, and you have a way out. So knowing where the kitchen is and how to get there can be very strategic and advantageous when emergency happens.
So it sounds like being prepared to survive an active shooter situation or also a fire, which has many of the same solutions, begins with anytime you go into somewhere, knowing where the exits are, having and thinking about how you would get out quickly.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be paranoid.
Hmm.
I mean, I hate people that want to scare people and make it all
Hmm.
sound like, head on a swivel 24/7 and
Hmm.
have your 5 guns and 7 knives and your other
Hmm.
backups on. You don't have to live like that. You pull your head out of your apps, APS, pay attention to life,
Hmm.
notice little things. It takes me no time, and I don't make a big deal of it when I go into a restaurant or a mall or a building and I notice exits. I know where they are. I don't have to think about them anymore. They're already registered. I know the way out. Didn't anytime, didn't, like, okay, honey, there's the exit there. There's an exit there. Daughter, you know where the exit. I don't quiz them and get all militant. I just have a good time with my family, making sure that I know we could get out if we have to. And I did that at, Disneyland, Universal Studios. You get in those long lines, 2-hour line for a 2-minute ride. There are emergency exits hidden. They got all that cool stuff to keep you occupied in line. There are emergency exits all over the place. And I know for a fact, because of the research, that if an emergency happened, earthquake, fire, shooting, whatever, most people are running to where they came in. Me and my family are going out one of those emergency exits.
And I like the point you're making about having this awareness, not from a sense of fear and paranoia, but one of just curiosity and mindfulness.
Yes, I mean, a catchphrase I use a lot, you'll hear me saying, is enjoy life safely. I
Mhm.
teach this stuff so people can enjoy life. I don't want them paranoid. And when you're aware,
Mhm.
you see the good things too. You can't
Mhm.
stop to smell the flowers if you don't see them in the first place. You'll notice the good things, and it makes life better. I don't like that I taught my wife and daughter this stuff, because when we're out and about, all of a sudden, sail. They see those sails. Okay, we got to stop here. But when you're aware, you
Mhm.
see everything.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when you see the potential bad that could be dangerous, you see it hopefully early enough to avoid it
Mhm.
altogether, or at least prepare yourself so it's not a surprise.
Mhm.
That's the worst thing, when something catches you by
Yeah.
surprise and you don't have a plan.
Mhm. Yeah. Very few things actually come out of nowhere. Now, if we do see that coming and we have to actually move to escape and get out, one of the concerns I have is, I'm not as fit as I was when I was 20, but I'm still I can get from point A to point B pretty well. But if I've got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old with me, it completely changes the dynamic. Do you have any advice for how to escape when you've got little ones with you?
Again, it would depend on where
Mhm.
you're at the situation. At a mall, you're going to grab hands and say, follow me. And you're going to make sure, if they're
Mhm.
real small, you're picking them up and running with them, just depending on
Mhm.
your physical abilities. And you'll have to know your abilities and have a plan that matches the age of your children. And your plan is going to change as the age of your children change. And so, you got to think, what can I do? When my daughter was, up to, 10, 11, throw over my shoulder and go. Now she's a high schooler. She can probably run faster than me. So
Mhm.
I'll go that way and point her in the right direction, and she'll
Mhm.
me, and I'll make sure that her and my wife are in front of me getting out. So that's the plan right now. But also, I'm not always right with my daughter and wife now. Like when she was little, she's always right with us. she's a high schooler now. She's looking at her stuff. My wife's looking at her stuff. I might be in the store next door looking at something that's more interesting to me. You know, I'm at the sporting goods store, they're at the clothing store. Something bad happens, you know, me being protector father, now my job is how do I find them to make sure they get the safety. So you got to have plans for any of those situations and think through it with what you can do. What I can do is going to be different from what, you know, maybe a 70 or 80-year-old grandparent can do with their grandkids. So you got to just be able to adjust it to what fits what you can do with the basic principles of knowing that escaping is ideal. Denying access is the next thing that you would want to do if it's a killer situation, or escaping is a more fire. And worst come to worst, if you had to defend yourself or your loved ones, how are you going to do it?
Excellent. And that escaping, as well as being aware of what's going around us, having an honest assessment of our own capabilities.
Exactly.
I've told this joke that's not really a joke on the show before, so listeners, forgive me. But you know, I used to say for a long time that my first defense skill was when I ran track in middle school. All right, getting that 800, you know, right, 800 yards at under 3 minutes, great self-defense. And
years ago, I mean, Mark, dating myself, Mark Lonsdale, who he was a trainer down in California, put out some different books on law enforcement training, self-defense. He wrote an article in a magazine. I still remember his first tip for self-defense was a jogging and running program.
Yep. And you know, getting into our older, you know, I'm now middle-aged, overweight, middle-class suburbanite. It's a heart attack is going to get me. So running is once again my primary form of self-defense.
Yeah, I mean, you know, self-defense should be keeping yourself healthy and alive for as long as possible, and keeping yourself fit, you know, some exercise. You know, I love burgers, so I'm not going to go on a healthy diet kick. But, you know, what people don't see is I post the burgers on the weekends. I'm eating salads and vegetables, healthy stuff during the week. But the healthier we can keep ourselves, the better we can react to an emergency situation. And we're not going to die of a heart attack or some of these other things that kill more people anyway.
One moment, we have a visitor. Yeah, and that cardiovascular conditioning, that's going to help us live longer, healthier, more active lives. And if on the off chance it also helps us escape from an active shooter situation or a mugger, that's fantastic too. Hold on one moment. The cat opened the door when she was coming in, and we can hear my wife on a conference call in the next room over. There we go. Yeah. All righty. So back to it. So what are some other things to know about escaping? We mentioned cover versus concealment earlier, and I'm not sure all of our listeners are going to know that distinction. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Cover will protect you from bullets. Concealment will hide you, but bullets can go through it. So if you're at the mall and you get behind a clothing rack, it might conceal you. The killer cannot see you, but if he starts shooting, bullets will go through those clothings and hit you. You know, you get behind a brick wall or something solid that bullets won't pass through, that is better because it offers you cover. Bullets will, you know, it's a way to deny bullets from getting access to you. And if you can use cover during your escape, so much the better. An example might be there's a shooting outside and you got cars and you leapfrog from car to car to car, and using those cars as, you know, especially the front where the engine is, as cover to get out of the kill zone.
And that kind of leapfrogging, moving from a cover or concealment if you don't have cover to cover in short sprints rather than one long run through clear space, sounds safer. Is that right?
It is, and especially if it's an outdoor thing and the guy's just shooting sporadically with no real target except targets of opportunity. So you're minimizing that opportunity by doing those quick leapfrogs. And if you, especially if, you know, if he's shooting this way and you're over here and you leapfrog, he may not even have seen you, and you're slowly getting farther and farther out of the range until you're in a safe distance and out of the kill zone.
And that's the ultimate goal for any of us. It's not our job to stop this guy, especially if we're in the situation with our kids. There's law enforcement's going to show up and do that job for us.
I agree 100%. Even if you are carrying a concealed weapon, it's not your job to draw your weapon and go hunting a killer. And if you do that, if you decide to take on that role, understand that you're taking on some risks, that another person may think you are actually a killer as well. Law enforcement show up, may think you are a killer as well. So if you're a good guy with a gun, and because you see him posted on internet all the time, if I was there, I would take him out or whatever. You need to be careful, because you can be mistakenly killed as a bad guy, even if you had good intentions. And in my classes, I talk about how you can, if you have taken out a bad guy, how you need to act when law enforcement shows up to make sure that you're safe from them, because they don't know. And if they come up hot, knowing that there's somebody with a gun killing people, and they see you with a gun, it could be bad for you.
It's a bad situation all around. And again, especially as parents, we have to give up that macho card, that idiot card, as soon as that first child comes into our lives.
You do. I mean, it's, my first and foremost responsibility is to keep my wife and daughter safe. And then it's also to make sure that I'm around for my wife and daughter. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was working a job where I was getting paid to protect people, that's a different story. I'm going to act differently in that situation than if I'm at the mall with my family, than if I'm at the mall by myself, or, it's going to be dictated by the circumstances. And for those that are working jobs where your job is to protect others, I commend you and thank you, because not everybody can do it. And if you signed on for that, I hopefully that you signed on seriously, and you take that job seriously and keep yourself trained and in the best physical condition so you can help others, but so you also go home to your family safe afterwards as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, once escape becomes impossible, and maybe that's even saying it wrong, but if there's something that means that we can't escape immediately and we have to take shelter and, instead of hide, as you say, deny the bad guy access to us, where do we start? Where do we start for that?
Locking doors. I mean, this is a big one in schools. I mean, especially if you have young kids. If a shooter comes into a school and starts shooting, 90% or more of the school is safe right now if they're in their classrooms. The only people that are in real danger are the people right there close to the gun person. So those people, if they're close to an exit and they can escape, fine. But if they got a bunch of little kids, or maybe kids with disabilities, which would make exiting the building and getting to safety difficult, they can lock doors and barricade and keep the kids inside that room safe. And they're going to have time to do it because the killer is in a different part of the school. So lockdown, which is very common throughout schools, is an effective strategy for a big portion of that facility. Also for hospitals, especially if you got patients. It's tough to get a nurse or a teacher to leave their patients or kids. So a lot of times they're going to lock down and deny and keep themselves and those they're taking care of safe. The people that are right by the gunman, they're the person that are probably, if they can't immediately just escape and get somewhere safe, that are going to have to defend themselves and attack back and take the guy out. If you're sitting in front of a classroom and the guy comes in, it's too late to lock the door. There's nowhere to run. It's the people at front that are going to just have to dogpile and take that guy out. I mean, and if they're big enough, I'm talking high school kids, college now. If they're little kids, it's that teacher's going to have to stop the guy to protect kids if he's already in the classroom.
Yeah, you shared a really good technique for the attack that I'll get to, but I want to also, keep talking a bit about the denying and the locking of the doors. There were you mentioned some very specific good tactics for locking a door or barricading a door that doesn't lock. One of the ones that I thought was very, very interesting, had a real aha moment, was instead of just piling heavy stuff in front of the door, if you can, making a daisy chain of objects and even people to the wall on the other side. Because I mean, you're going to have to use explosives or disassemble the door to get it open under those circumstances.
Yeah, that kept people alive at Virginia Tech. Some students at Virginia Tech laid down and did a daisy chain and kept that door closed and kept the Virginia Tech killer from going into their room. And I've done videos with Reflex Protect videos where I've put people on the floor, and not big people, just regular folks, female and male, and had big guys trying to open the door and they can't get in. And I've done that in live classes. You know, whenever I do a live active shooter class, I'll take a couple women and a couple big men, and I'll have the women do the daisy chain and have the big men try to open the door. And everybody's like, wow. And then I asked the ladies when they stand up, I was like, was it difficult? No, because the guys are basically pushing on the wall that they're daisy to. So it doesn't take any strength for them to do it.
Yeah, if you anytime you pick a fight with the laws of physics, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And this is a good application of that. Now, the other side of that, though, when the door opens outward into a hallway and it doesn't lock, that's, again, the laws of physics make that much more difficult. But you did provide some good ideas on that. Could you expound on what are the best ways to stay safe in that situation?
I mean, piling stuff in front can still help, because when he opens the door, that he's got junk to go through. But if there are some doors, depending on the handle, you could put something over the handle and anchor it to something on the side, you know, and so when he tries to pull it out, it's tied shut. And you could have pre-made little cables with a eye hook. You know, I know places that have done that. You just slip that over the handle and clip it onto the bolt that's on the wall, and then it won't open. You can instill deadbolts. They got some that go into the floor, some that go into the wall. Those take a little bit more than just jerry rigging, but you can make doors like that. You can just have a cable, you know, a strap that you bought at a hardware store around that handle and tie it off to something to the side, or hold it. When you're holding it at the side, instead of holding it where I'm holding it here and you're pulling the door open, that's tug of war. If I go off to the side and hold it, it gives me more strength if he's trying to open it that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, again, it's the physics of the leverage,
Exactly.
of the angle.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. And then you also mentioned just piling as much stuff in front of the door so they open it and there's all these obstacles between them and you, which both slows them down. It's a huge pain in the ass, and a lot of these shooters follow the path of least resistance. And also, they're going to be somewhat vulnerable while they're maneuvering through that, and open to that third stage that you mentioned, which is, and again, you replace fight with attack back.
I like that because I want you to be offense. It's not a fight. When, you know, a lot of people think fight, it's your schoolyard fist fight. We're not fighting, and it's not a fight like the martial arts. You are defending your life, and that takes some offense, which is attacking back. And I don't want people to think, well, I could never attack anyone. You're not. You're attacking back because he started it, and it's your only option to stay alive at this point. And one of the reasons I joined Reflex Protect is because they provided a tool that allows anybody a way to defend themselves. But without that, we're going to use improvised weapons, our hands, our feet, our teeth, anything we can, because it's that serious and we have to stop that person. And I go into a lot of mindset into my classes and in the book and different things, because that's more important than any physical technique, to have the mindset that you will be a survivor and you will stop that person from hurting you or others that you're protecting.
And some of the techniques about that, I mean, not everybody has the time or the interest to spend decades learning martial arts, but there are some very specific techniques that you can apply almost immediately. One that you mentioned in the book is, I'd always kind of known about smacking someone with a fire extinguisher, which is in almost every classroom, visible in most places that active shooter things happen. Well, you show the technique of hitting them with the fire extinguisher and then blasting them with the fire extinguisher immediately afterward, which
Yeah.
it blew
Or
my mind.
blast and hit. Yep,
Yeah,
blast
yeah.
and hit right when they come. And you
It's gonna
don't
ruin your day.
you don't pick up your fire extinguisher and go hunting the shooter down the.
No.
You ambush them at a corner, or you ambush them at a door. So when they come in the door, you're on the side and you blast them and hit them in the face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the same with the reflex protect. When, you know, we started introducing that to nurses and schools, you know, teachers, places that couldn't have firearms. And before that, I thought the fire extinguisher was the best thing for those people. Now I say, you know, use reflex protect. It's the same thing. You don't grab that and you're going to hunt them down the hallway. It's something you ambush from the side of the door. And when they come in, you're out of their field of vision and you just blast them right in the face with that. And when their eyes are burning, then you take the gun away and just pound on their head until they're unconscious or whatever you have to do. And you just got to have that mindset that you will do anything and be the survivor.
And so that fire extinguisher is a great option, especially in schools and such, because they're everywhere in schools.
Yep.
Those locations. But there's also any number of other improvised weapons, things that, you know, heavy objects that are, or even just a glass of water or a bunch of craft paper thrown in the eyes to briefly blind them. There's so many things that you can use.
Yeah, anything basically can be an improvised weapon. You know, improvised weapons are not objects, they're mindset. You know, John Wick, if you like the John Wick movies, what's the legend? He killed 3 people with a pencil. I mean, anything can be a weapon if you have the right mindset. That is more important than any object.
And I think, again, with using that term attack back instead of fight, that we're not going to fight fair even a little bit here. You know, we're going to use weapons, we're going to bite, we're going to kick, we're going to spit, and we're going to gang up on them.
Yep. We're gonna do, yeah. If you have other people, you use a team mentality. You know, you dogpile the guy. That has worked on numerous occasions. Regular people dogpiling the guy with the gun and just putting on him and taking the gun away. People have done it, just ordinary, regular people, no training. And so that's one of the first and foremost things I teach people. You know, the gun disarms, there's a ton of fancy ones that we do in the martial arts. I like some of them better than others, and I have videos showing them and stuff. But the one that I teach most civilians is lock the, you know, you're in your door or you're by a corner because you couldn't get somewhere. And when the guy comes around through the doorway or around the corner, the first guy grabs toward the gun and forces it to the ground, and the partners behind dogpile and tackle. No finesse, no fancy moves, just gun to the ground, tackle and pound. That's what I teach folks because it has saved people and it's something they can remember. Gun to the ground, tackle and pound.
And all that fancy stuff getting more complex because we're in a fight flight response. Our higher order thinking skills are gone anyway. We're not going to be able to act on something much more complicated than that.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent. So that's
not without again, a lot of training. A lot, you know, that's the thing. If you put in the time and the hours to train, those other things will come to you. But when I go into a school and I only have 6 hours to teach them, you know, some real basic strategies, you know, they're not going to remember martial art techniques.
Now, what's the adage? You don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of training.
Yep. But, you know, you got to remember most people, they don't want to train in this stuff. They became teachers, they became nurses, you know, other, you know, whether they're office workers, because they didn't want to be cops. They didn't want to be military. They didn't want the warrior class that, you know, those of us that study martial arts and have gone into the military or law enforcement, they didn't want those. And so you can't be saying you have to have those or you're just dead meat.
Yeah.
We can teach some strategies that'll keep people alive.
Yeah. And again, I think it's important for our viewers to understand that anybody can do this, that in those moments, you know, there are very few animals in any species that are more dangerous than a mom protecting their kids.
Yep. And you got to bring that out. You You know, in the live classes, I'll have people ask, you know, how big is the average house cat? How big is your house cat there?
Frodo, there's maybe 7 pounds.
7 pounds. You know,
Yeah,
a lot smaller than you, right?
yeah.
How anxious are you to go give Frodo a bath?
I'm anxious about giving Frodo a bath.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, what's that
Yeah.
cat gonna do? That cat's gonna bite, claw, go
Mhm,
under, over, through
mhm,
you if he doesn't want a bath. That's the kind of mentality we need to have when we're fighting for our life, that we will
mhm,
bite, scratch, kick, elbow, knee, hit, whatever we can to be the survivor.
mhm. And not just us, but also protecting the kids and people in the room, which is that's another wrinkle in this sort of situation. We've touched on it a little bit because we're talking about schools a lot, but say I'm in a situation where I couldn't escape with my kids and it's time to deny and attack back. Are there some best practices that I can do, things I can tell my kids to do, places in a room that are maybe safer for them while I'm getting, doing the adult responsibility?
You want your kids out of what we call the fatal funnel. So if you can have them along the wall that's by the door. So when you walk into a room, there's your fatal funnel. You know, that's sort of what you're looking at. And that's where, you know, if you're a police officer going into the room, it's where you don't want to be, because that's where you're vulnerable. But it's also when the bad guy's coming into the room, that's where he's vulnerable. And if you're outside of that funnel where he sees, you're a little safer because he's not targeted on. So you have your kids back along the wall, back in those sides, out of that funnel, and you are right next to the door, because that's the place where you have the opportunity to take him out. You're ambushing him from the side. If you are way across the room, you can't do anything. He comes in, he sees you, you're, 12, 15, 20 feet away. All he can do is shoot, and you can play Jackie Chan and dodge. But if you are right by the door and he walks in, that's where you take him out.
And just to clarify, we want to be on the side of the door by where it opens, not
It's
behind the
gonna
door.
it's gonna depend on where you're at.
Mm,
Preferably, if it opens out or opens in, it's gonna make a difference. I've seen doors where here's the wall and here's the door, and it opens this.
mm,
So if it's like that, you can't be on this side. You are gonna have to place yourself so you're maybe not right against the wall, but as the door opens, where you could take that guy. So the room configuration is going to
mm.
dictate that. Yes, ideally, if it opens this way, you're right here, but go, look around, see places where here's a wall and there's the door. And so you only have one side that you can be on.
Mm. Or also some of those rooms that have a viewing window, if the area right where you would stand is an open window without anything covering it.
Exactly. Yep.
Mhm.
So it's
Okay.
gonna, you have to, go with whatever environment that you're stuck.
Mhm.
We do the best we
Yeah.
can with what we got.
Mhm. And that does remind me of an important point you brought up in the book during the deny phase. If you are in a room with windows into the hallway, covering those windows can be very, very helpful as well.
Covering the windows, keeping the place dark, and no sound. If the killer doesn't know you're in there, nothing attracts him.
Mhm.
They're usually attracted by sight and sound. They see you, hear you. So if you can eliminate those two things, they may go looking for someone else.
One final talk on that about schools in particular. You'd mentioned earlier about how we're not always there with our kids. And school lockdown procedures really do range in quality and survivability, I think. Uh,
Mhm.
what are some ways that we can prepare our kids for surviving a school shooting when we can't be there to help them?
Again, it's going to be age determined.
Mm-hmm.
High school students like my daughter, I could teach her strategies to keep her safe. Little kids, you're not going to really be able to teach them something that, they're going to have to do what the teacher, that's right. So the best thing we can do is make sure the schools that our kids are going to have a proper plan and have some training and have thought this through. You know, I'm fortunate here in Missoula, when I was on the Safari Land team, we taught thousands of teachers and nurses and people in the Missoula Valley community. And so the schools where my daughter was going to school, I was actually there teaching those schools with that team active shooter strategies. So they were better prepared and had a plan and a strategy. And so if where your kids are at, anybody watching this, make sure your kids' schools have a plan, have some training, have some strategies, and know what's going to happen if something terrible happens at that building, so they can protect your kids. And when your kids get older, start teaching them some strategies about escaping, about how denying and things like that, so they could fend for themselves if they had to.
And you can go right to the principal or to the school board to get that information.
Yep.
And then
we're very fortunate that we had a superintendent here in Missoula that was very proactive and wanted all of the teachers and staff and everybody in the Missoula schools to go through this kind of training.
Yeah. And besides, so Savariland has a product. What are some other good, I guess, brand names? Not the right term, but I'm going to use it. Brand names of school shooter survival scenarios that if we're ask the school board, hey, what survival shooter scenario do you or training do you guys use? That would be, that could be reassuring to us, that tell us that they're in the right direction.
Obviously, I got to say Reflex Protect program. And one thing that really puts Reflex Protect separate from some of the others is the actual product and giving the teachers a means to fight back without improvising. Why plan to improvise if there's a tool that they can have in the classroom? You know, the tool's this or this, the small one. And this is a spray that you can use indoors. I mean, it was created for hospitals because of workplace violence in hospitals. You could spray it indoors, stop a violent person, and not just shooters. This has been used in hospitals for a lot of different kind of violence. People with sticks, people with other kind of things trying to beat up nurses. But you know, it has a tool to stop people.
And is that a capsicum spray or what? Or...
It's CS based. It's a CS gel. The OC, you spray that, everybody in the room's coughing and gagging. And if you got or the HVAC system, this stuff, I could put my arm around your shoulders, you could be sprayed, and I could stand here be laughing because you'd be in pain and I'd be fine.
So it's a gel.
It's a gel. It's a CS gel. It sprays out extreme, just like wasp spray. And so you know the big one shoots 15 to 20 feet. So you can be a little distance and just cover the guy's face, and it works faster than pepper spray. If you go to the reflexprotect.com or tactical.com, you'll see cops and other people being sprayed and saying that stuff's worse than pepper spray.
So that's basically a super soaker full of pain.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay.
And you got a small one you can carry around your pocket too.
Okay.
So
that's an example with the product.
Yep. So that's a difference that Reflex Protect, we give all the strategies that are in my book. I mean, I took the course that I was teaching and I rebranded it into the Reflex Protect course, but then we also added the product and a component where we teach people how to use these, and take some inert ones, go out and practice with them. So the teachers actually, or just whoever, get to practice with this. So the first time they ever touch one isn't in an emergency. We make sure they're comfortable and understand it. So that's one difference with our course. Now, there are some other trainers out there that are looking at incorporating this into their training, which we hope they do, because we just think it's a value add. Alice is very popular. Sometimes Alice is hit or miss. You might get a great Alice instructor, you might get one that's not as good. So I've heard mixed reviews from Alice, just depending on which instructor you get.
Is it one of those situations where it's a good curriculum, but they may not, that they have a licensing program from the
Exactly.
instructors, so they don't vet people maybe as well as they should because that
Yep.
there's a conflict of interest on the financial side.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. So you just don't know who you'll get as an instructor.
Mm,
And have they brought a lot of extra with them, or do all they know is what the notebook that I
mm,
gave them, and how good of a presenter and teacher are they? So there's those aspects too. um Jesus Villanova, crisis reality training. He's out of Tacoma, Washington. uh Great instructor, has some really good active shooter stuff, especially for schools.
mm.
I've gotten together with him a few times, and great instructor, puts out some really good stuff as well.
Excellent. Oh, great. Well, Alan, I really want to thank you for coming on today. And before we close, though, this is clearly not your first interview. Um, what have people not asked you enough? What do you wish people would ask you about more and give you more opportunity to talk about?
Everything. And I say that because a lot of people want to ignore this topic. And
Mhm,
it's they put the blinders on. It's scary. Violence is scary. And so let's just not think about it and hope it never happens,
mhm,
rather than asking the basic questions. How can I have a simple plan? What are some things I can do to stay more safe? What are some tools that I can maybe purchase to keep myself and my family safe? So I wish people would ask everything a little bit more, and just take
mhm,
safety, their loved ones' safety, a little more seriously, and be proactive enough to get some basic training, some basic knowledge. You don't have to become a Navy SEAL, you don't have to become a ninja. Just learn some basic safe habits, kind of stuff that I teach. And then just get out and enjoy life safe with that.
I think as part of that, I mean, you move in those circles where the most dangerous people you know are also the most mellow, friendly, chill people you know, as a general rule. And that's not coincidental. And I feel like
Yeah.
there's that point where you decide you're not going to think about it because it's scary to think about, but you're still scared of it. And then you spend a little bit of time in that area where you are thinking about it a bit too much while you're training. And that can be kind of scary as you become aware of how dangerous it is and you don't yet have a skill set that's up to the task. But once you get through that, you're actually much less afraid and it's much less a part of your life than it was before you started training.
Very true. It is. And you don't have to have a lot of training to
Mhm,
get competent enough to keep yourself
mhm,
safe.
mhm,
And the situational awareness, I mean, you got books behind you by Jason Hansen, Rory Miller,
mhm,
Nick Hughes up there. Every one of them, they teach situational awareness like I do. Yeah, we all teach it because it's so important. And if you pull your head out of your apps and be more aware of
mhm,
life, you're going to reduce the likelihood that something bad happens.
mhm,
And then the next thing to do is quit being a jerk. We saw that last
mhm.
week. People getting into an argument over shoveling snow.
No.
Three people killed over a stupid argument because they got escalated and
Mhm,
yelling at each other, calling
mhm,
foul names, this, that. One person gets a gun and they keep yelling, and three people,
mhm.
people were murdered. Then he killed himself needlessly.
Yeah,
I think you got verbal judo on the shelf up there too.
indeed.
Uh,
Yeah, right up there.
De-escalation skills, which I also teach classes through Reflex Protect on communication and de-escalation. More people need to learn and use those skills.
And
That
not just from a tactical thing. As parents, the verbal
Yes.
judo, I've only had to use it once or twice when I wasn't being paid to be in situations where you have to de-escalate stuff. But man, I use it with my teenager and sometimes my wife, but don't tell her that. On a
it
regular
is
basis.
that's a skill that
Mhm,
that skill is more important than the punching and kicking.
mhm,
It's going to be a rare situation that you encounter violence. it's almost a daily situation for some people, depending on where they work, that they encounter angry, upset people.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing how to work and de-escalate and deal with those angry, upset people is a very important skill. I used to teach it to courses to the Forest Service and different people. And I used to teach mediation courses because I was a mediator when I practiced law. And a lot of the de-escalation stuff that I teach comes from mediating and the course I used to teach. We started teaching those through Reflex Protect because it's such an important skill and people are wanting it. I taught recently at a healthcare facility because they are dealing with a lot of angry people coming into their facilities right now. Upset people.
Yeah. And you don't, stopping a fight before it happens has a 0% chance of getting you killed. Where even if you got a level of training like yourself, getting into a fight, you have a more than 0% chance that it's going to just go entirely wrong and you don't get to go home to your kids. So that de-escalation, that awareness, so important.
It is. I mean, even if you're trained, okay, I get into a physical altercation and I elbow the guy in the jaw, he drops like a rock, smacks his head on the concrete and dies on me. Even if I was justified, I am still taking a lot of money, a lot of time dealing with the legal system, and I have to live with somebody died. I killed somebody.
Yeah.
So if I can talk him down and walk away, that's the biggest win, because now I'm home and my money's going to my family, not lawyers. I'm not going to jail, arrested, even if it's only temporary. That's why those skills are so important.
That's kind of a through line of this whole show, even when I'm talking to not just tactical people, but medical staff, people who've come in, someone who came in for a very early episode about watching for signs of suicide. It's all about awareness and then those verbal interventions first. Now, with an active shooter, the verbal interventions usually aren't that effective, but that awareness is still there, and that willingness to act and act quickly.
Yeah, the active stuff I teach is when talking, it's too late for talking. When bullets are flying, people are dying. Talking is, the crisis communication skills, the verbal judo, the effective communication. That's all before bullets are flying. If somebody pulls a gun and starts shooting people, it's because they want a body count. We're not talking. We're doing all the other. We're escaping. We're denying. We're attacking back and defending ourselves. We're staying alive and keeping others alive.
And even with that, how many of those shootings might have been prevented if the right person had used active listening, mediation skills, listening, and deterrence with that person before they became the sort of person who would commit an active shooting.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Brown, he was the military police officer that killed the shooter in Fairchild Air Force Base, early 90s. He wrote a book, Warnings Unheeded or Unheeded Warnings, but there were so many signs before that person went and started killing people that day, that if the proper intervention could have happened, it could have kept everybody alive. And he writes about that in his book, a very good book. And so there are a lot of situations that could be prevented if you had some better communication skills and you recognize somebody's having problems, and we deal with them with effective listening and communication and get them the help they need before something terrible happens.
And that's a whole nother species of training that is available to parents that I think a lot of us don't think about, or maybe aren't aware exists for us to go take.
True. Very true.
Well, thank you, Alan, so much for taking the time today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure the viewers are going to get a lot out of it.
I appreciate you having me on, Jason. It's been a pleasure. Help you out or be on again sometime about a different topic. Be happy to do that as well.
Thank you for watching today. I hope you found something useful or maybe even inspiring. If you liked what you saw, please take a few minutes to subscribe, like, and comment. Those little things add up to big help for the channel. If you loved it, consider checking out our Facebook page for more family safety news and information. And think about supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get early access, monthly training resources, blooper footage, and other exclusive benefits. You'll find links to both in the show notes. Most of all, thank you for being part of the safest family on the block team. Stay safe, everybody. See you next time.